My name is Karie Fugett. I just published my first book, a memoir called Alive Day. It came out on May 6th, 2025. I'm going to read the prologue, which I know there's a lot of debate about whether we should even have prologues, but I think it works really well for my book. So this took place in November 2005. I wake up on a blow-up mattress next to a mountain of beer boxes with a pistol under my pillow. I'd noticed its hard edges on my cheek, felt around and paused when my fingertips touched cool metal. I pull it out and hold it flat in my hands, stare at its angles and curves, consider the desolation of the barrel, trying to remember how the hell it got there. Cleve is already awake and pulling a yellow and blue striped polo shirt over his head. What is this? I ask. He chuckles and sits down on the edge of the mattress. With pops and squeaks, it lifts my body and rolls me toward him. Don't worry about that, he says. He picks up a pair of camo print cargo shorts that had been crumpled on the floor next to the mattress, pulls them over his legs, and stands once they're at his thighs. My mind is somewhere else, struggling to piece together the night before. The sound of Cleve's zipper pulls me out of a trance. I put it there. He explains that the night before, he'd found Fowler, his 19-year-old Marine Corps buddy, frantic and sobbing with both arms extended, the pistol squeezed between his sweaty, trembling hands, and pointed toward his wife. Earlier that night, Fowler found a love letter in the hidden compartment of a wooden box his wife kept in the nightstand. It was from another Marine in their unit, one of his best friends. "Our baby's in the other room, you fucking psycho," she had screamed, but Fowler remained. I imagine his face distorted by the puffy wetness of his crying. Imagine his wife regretting saying those words the moment they fell from her mouth. Did she drop to her knees and beg for forgiveness, willing to do anything to save her own life? I wonder what I would do if I were looking down the barrel of a gun. They say that when someone is about to die, they see a montage of their life leading up to that point. Movies depict the moment before death as a reel of happy memories. Birthdays, graduations, first kisses, one after another after another. But when I imagine this young woman, her baby in the room on the other side of the wall behind her, I know she was thinking about her future, all the things she would miss out on, her parentless child. Cleve, a peacemaker among his friends, convinced his buddy not to shoot. "Hey man, this isn't you," I imagine him saying with both hands in the air as he slowly moves toward his friend. "Look me in the eyes. I love you, man. Put the gun down. I got you." I wonder how much Fowler resisted Cleve's urging. Did he hand the gun over right then, or did he tighten his finger around the trigger? It has always made more sense to me that the person whose life flashes before their eyes is the one about to take the life of someone else. All those moments that chipped away at their humanity until finally they break, leaving an unrecognizable version of themselves looking over the edge of the abyss, unable to conceive of any other option but to kill. Fowler must have thought of something worth not going to jail for, because he lowered the gun and handed it to Cleve. I'm sure Cleve hugged him. Cleve was a huge guy, and when his arms wrapped around you, you were cocooned, safe, and for a moment protected from the rest of this terrible world. I'd been so drunk I had already fallen asleep when all of this went down. I missed the whole thing. I'd flown into Jacksonville to visit Cleve the night before. I was still wearing my Navy flight attendant uniform with my long brown hair twisted into a bun, tiny gold painted wings that said US Airways pinned to my chest. When I turned the corner into arrivals, Cleve stood next to the luggage carousel, his smile broad and his arms wide. I dropped my suitcase and bounded toward him, flinging myself into his arms. Wanting to remember his scent, I pressed my cheek against his chest and inhaled spearmint and spicy sweet deodorant. I missed you, Fugett, he said with an Alabama drawl. I nodded to say, me too, and squeezed him tighter. You're gorgeous in that fucking uniform, he said, and we kissed. I thought, this is our second first kiss. Our first kiss had happened years ago when we were kids, all lanky limbs and fickle hearts, blissfully unaware that it marked the first day of the rest of our life together, or that I would end up being the love of his short life. Cleve retrieved my suitcase, grabbed my hand, and led me outside. He loaded my bag into the trunk of his white Mustang, and I slid into the passenger seat. Ready to meet these crazy bastards? He asked as he started the car. The engine growled to life as I buckled my seatbelt and pulled down the sun visor to check my appearance in its mirror. My eyes, pale blue with prominent limbal rings, sparkled in the visor's buttery light. They were the one physical feature I'd always been confident in, the one thing I could count on being complimented on. Mascara had smudged below my right eye. I licked my index finger and wiped it away, then looked at Cleve. Yep. Jacksonville was a man's world, the whole damn town a bachelor pad. The main drag, which led to Camp Lejeune, wasn't much more than asphalt and spindly pines. The rest was car lots, strip clubs, and tattoo parlors, chain restaurants, and a sad excuse for a mall. Young men with matching crew cuts roamed in packs on the sides of the road. Colorful hot rods purchased with deployment money revved at red lights. And in the median of Western Boulevard, the Jacksonville Ninja, an anonymous man who felt as natural to the place as the pines, practiced his finest karate moves with a boombox on his shoulder. Background noise was artillery rounds and low-flying aircraft, both so loud they often set off car alarms. Few people were local. Nearly all Jacksonville's residents were transplants lured there by the Marine Corps. With its fancy uniforms, cool guns, and promises of bonus money, healthcare, and retirement. In a town full of bored young men, there was no shortage of house parties. Cleve took me to one straight from the airport, stopping only for a bag of McDonald's double cheeseburgers and a tank of gas. He warned me on the way. These guys get pretty wild. I rolled my eyes and laughed. Not even 6 months ago, I'd been living in Tampa, a place known for its nightlife. I'd survived plenty of parties like this. In Tampa, I'd worked at a popular ale house, which meant sleeping in, working late, then going to whatever rager was happening that night. House parties were often held at pastel-colored, palm tree-lined mansions. Kids rolled blunts the size of cigars, pissed in the pool, streaked through the house, tripped, snorted, and fucked in the back rooms. By nature, I was shy, but I'd grown to enjoy proximity to chaos and recklessness, the thrill of trying mysterious new things and surrounding myself with extroverted people. A sort of high came from the risk involved at parties. A fight could break out. Someone was probably cheating somewhere. The neighbors could call the cops at any moment. I found it much more interesting than my life had been when I was a kid with my 10 o'clock curfew and Sunday morning church services. Besides, it was easy to fly under the radar, everyone too sloshed to judge me sitting in the corner petting the dog and observing the circus around me. I shrugged. Tampa was pretty wild. I'm sure I'll be fine. Well, Hamilton and his wife are swingers, Cleve said. If they go in the back room with anyone, it's probably best you don't go back there. Sometimes they snort lines and shit too, so don't worry about me, I said. I reached for Cleve's hand and pulled it to my mouth for a kiss. I'm not the innocent Foley girl you met in 8th grade. Well, that's for damn sure, he said. He winked, let go of my hand, and squeezed my boob. When we arrived, a man wearing nothing but socks stood on a coffee table swinging his dick in circles, screaming, "Woo!" over and over between glugs of his beer. Behind him, empty cases of Bud Light were stacked against the wall up to the ceiling. The air smelled like cigarettes and broccoli, And to the left of me, a man with brillowy pink hair sprawled across a tattered green couch, his head and one of his arms hanging off the edge. He took a Xanny bar, the naked guy said. He's fine. Woo! Cleve made his rounds, saying hi to all his friends. I followed behind, holding on to the back pocket of his jeans. 5 people in their underwear sat on the back porch playing strip poker. It was mid-November and cold enough that you could see your breath. I thought they were crazy. A shirtless guy introduced himself by telling me he had a third nipple. See? He said, pointing to a spot on the center of his rib cage. It looked like the chicken pox scar I have on my chest, powder pink and slightly raised. I wondered for a second if my mom had lied to me and if I actually had 3 nipples too. I am way too sober for this shit, I said, and Cleve led me to the beer. I drank as much as it took me for my I drank as much as it took for my anxiety to slip away, for a messy confidence to take its place. I don't remember much else. The next morning, I woke up with the gun under my pillow. Just put it in your purse, Cleve says as we get dressed. There aren't any bullets in it. Gripping the gun cautiously, I push tampons aside and cram the thing in my purse, noting how strange it looks next to my pink wallet. Being in possession of something that holds so much power scares me. I'd never held a pistol before, only a shotgun once when I was 9. Dad had woken me in the wee hours of the morning and snuck me out of my room to drive me to the edge of my aunt's farm in Alberta, Alabama. We sat in a tree stand for hours before we spotted a doe. Dad placed the gun in my arms and positioned it toward her. Look through here, he said. Do you see it? Yeah. The creature was apparition-like, peacefully grazing on soybeans in the dawn light. Put your finger on the trigger here, Dad said. He placed his index finger over mine. Ready? I swallowed to loosen the knot in my throat. He pressed my finger and the gun exploded, the recoil strong enough to leave a sore spot on my puny shoulder. The doe disappeared. We assumed I'd missed, but then I overheard my dad talking to my uncle about it. They'd found the deer dead in the woods not far from where I'd shot it. It was pregnant. I vowed I'd never shoot a gun again. 11 years later, I am struck by the heaviness of the pistol in my purse. I don't trust that it doesn't have bullets, that it won't go off by accident. I don't want to look like a wuss, though, so I carry it anyway. I couldn't have known then that this was only the beginning. Soon I would carry so much more than I ever asked to hold.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you. I'm from Pensacola. I was born and raised there. Cities that are in your book were like bigger cities to me.
Yeah.
Growing up, it's like where we would go to like party or whatever. Like Foley was like, and my mama and my dad's family lived in Orange Beach and Cantonment and Warrington and all that. So the Throde rolls and all that. I was just like so happy to see these things. I'm like, oh my God, I've never read anything in like anywhere. Nobody writes about this stuff. The only time
Mhm.
really I think I've seen Alabama in the news in the last 10 years is Walton Goggins. I was digging it, and I was married to somebody in the Navy. Just having these points of like similarity, not, I mean, totally different experience, but I just was really so happy because I feel like our part of the world doesn't get that much representation. Military experiences are like silent, and I think that we as a culture kind of know now about stories like yours, but it was just so nice to see transparency around that. How are you feeling right now that it's just been released?
It feels surreal. Most of my life, I'm not one of those people where like my whole life I was like, I want to be an author. This is what I'm going to do. I spent most of my life not sure what I was going to be when I grew up. And I think that's pretty common for people who are struggling somewhere on the poverty line. Um, because it's about survival more than big dreams. It's about how do I pay my bills versus, who do I want to be? Who am I? Whatever. So yeah, most of my life, it was very much focused on like, okay, I just have to get a job. I probably need to get married. Definitely wasn't thinking about being an author. So yeah, it's surreal to be that now and be talking about all of these places that I've never seen in books either.
You know, one thing we're constantly hearing these days is that it's impossible to sell a memoir to a publisher. Like a lot of agents are not taking it. So if you have anything that you'd like to share about how you did that and how it went, I think everyone would love to know.
So what I'm gonna say is kind of a mixed bag, and so I got my agent and my book deal pre-COVID, and I ended up taking 2 years off because of COVID and because I also had a baby. And I want to preface this by saying that memoir, personal stories, they are so important and people need to keep writing them. I think they're going to have their moment again. I think we just need to wait it out. We're, in like a romanticy era right now, which is fantastic for romance. They needed their moment probably because they, um, weren't really respected for a very long time. But so that's cool for them. But in the meantime, I think nonfiction, people just they're burnt out by real life. Once the pandemic came, they're stuck in their home. They're um, only able to communicate and go to work and whatever online. And I think fiction provides, this form of escape that people were really needing, and it stuck. And that's where we're at right now. So all that to say, yes, the publishing industry has shifted when it comes to memoir. They are, however, still getting published. I think the important thing right now, though, is when people are thinking about their story, they need to think outside of their own experience and try to figure out how it's connected to a larger culturally significant issue, whether it's, like for me, military, veterans, war. I mean, it's kind of like up and down. Like you hear about it more sometimes in the news than others. But that's kind of how they're trying to market it, is to like connect it to that bigger, these bigger issues that affect a lot of people. And I think that's what publishers are really thinking about when they look at memoir. They're like, okay, who else can relate to this, and how can we connect this story to those larger issues? And the more you can do that, the better. The other is, I think a lot of memoir is sort of prescriptive right now. Like, how can you help people with what you've learned? Things like that. They call it memoir plus, or like memoir with a message. Not, it's not just about the storytelling anymore, unfortunately. Indie presses are still publishing literary memoir. I think that Big Five is going to do it again eventually. Like it'll have its moment. I think it's just going to be up and down. But yeah, until then, I guess I think of like memoir now, like you've done op-eds, right?
Mhm.
You have to have that lead, and like what are you arguing and how are you backing it up? You kind of have to think of your memoir in that way too. Like you're using your personal experience and your story, and you can be as creative with your writing as you want to be, but you also have to make sure it's clear like why you're writing this, what your argument is, and you know it needs to be obvious what people are going to be getting out of it, I guess.
Is there anything that's your favorite scene right now, or a scene that like you left out that you've been thinking about?
So a lot of it is heavy, right? But I tried to weave in like joyful moments or like humor or absurdity, whatever, to just kind of like break that up a little bit. So those tend to be my favorite moments. One of the chapters that I really enjoyed writing, and I still enjoy reading, is, I can't remember which one it is, but we go to Vegas, where like we had been at Walter Reed and we're like surrounded by amputees, and we're just like in this like hospital world. And then suddenly Sheldon Adelson, or Adelson, I'm not sure how his name is pronounced, but he's like the 12th richest man in the world at the time. And he's like, hey, I'm going to send out this huge private jet, and pick you guys up, and we'll feed you on the plane, and then we'll, fly you to Vegas, put you up in penthouses. And my friend and her boyfriend at the time, well, fiance, they were gonna go elope at some like random Elvis Vegas situation. And Sheldon Adelson was like, no, we're going to have a full on wedding in the next couple days at the Palazzo. And I mean, it was just like this crazy whirlwind, weird. It was on Memorial Day weekend. That one was fun to write. It's fun to talk about. It was fun to experience, obviously. So it's probably one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, I like that chapter a lot too. I found myself laughing at like really little things kind of often. Your mom calling those chicken figurines her finds and like that. I love those little funny words that people use where we're from.
Yes.
Um,
Her finds. She'd go out every Sunday and like try to find chickens. It was like her way of escaping.
mhm.
Um, yeah.
You know, we all have our thing. I mean, I feel like the yard sale culture and like, thrift store culture down there, at least when I was growing up, was really robust. I also got really excited to see like things like the Limited 2 and the MASH game. I mean, I was just, oh my God, it's like sudden nostalgia onslaught.
I had fun with that too. I wanted to squeeze in as much of those little nostalgia moments as well, because again, there's a lot of heavy stuff in the book, but for me, like remembering things that I hadn't really thought about in a long time that just remind me of like carefree childhood, that was really nice.
The story, just for people who haven't like read the back cover or whatever, it sort of starts like with your childhood and moves up through your marriage. What made you decide to end there?
As far as memoirs are concerned, mine has a pretty long timeline already. So I tried to cut it even sooner, but it just sort of felt like, as I was writing and like trying to find the appropriate place to do it, I think finally leaving this place that felt so sort of claustrophobic to me, or that like this, I'd all through the entire book, I wanted some kind of like autonomy, freedom to like be who I wanted, go where I wanted. And I never was able to quite get there. And I think that was kind of the first moment where I was like, I have everything I need to pursue my dreams. All of these choices are my own because I want them, not because I have limited choices to choose from and I have to pick one. Um, and yeah, it just felt sort of symbolic to not only leave Alabama, but to leave with this like newfound appreciation and love for it, because I had finally found a sort of home there, I guess.
The themes in the book that I think were really like resonant for me just because I did grow up in that area in military towns. So I met a lot of people and I knew a lot of people who went off to war and came back with injuries and then experienced, a lot of substance use, abuse, addiction, all that kind of stuff. I just wonder if you have anything to say about how that's represented in your book or any thoughts that you had, or like, I noticed that for me, I learn about my own thoughts as I'm writing stories. I wonder if that happened to you.
So when I first started writing it, and I wasn't even sure it was a book, I was just kind of writing what I'd seen. It was more diary like. I really did not have a good idea of like the opioid crisis, or like where we were on that timeline or how that fit in. I just really did not have a good understanding of that. But later on, when I started really writing toward a book in undergrad, and then especially in my MFA, and I started looking back, and and there had been some time between when the opioid crisis was really peaking at the time and when I started writing. I was looking back and I was like, oh my gosh, this was happening at the peak of the opioid crisis. Um, and while all that stuff was happening with Purdue and Oxycontin, and I started to get angry in a new way. Like I'd already been sad and upset that I was being ignored by doctors in my day-to-day life, but it hit me that we were a part of this like much bigger thing that very wealthy people were aware of and were doing things like they caused it, right? In a lot of ways. Yeah, I started to become quite angry. Um, and really just started to think of addiction in a new way, I think. Because even though I experienced my husband suffering from it. I was young and just, it's taboo here to talk about addiction. And there's a lot of blame and shame involved and isolation. And even I was feeling that as the spouse. I think doing the research and writing through it and thinking about how young we were and where we were on this timeline of opioid crisis or whatever, I was able to sort of not only forgive myself, but I understand better now, I think, how to be supportive to others who are going through the same.
One thing that I really appreciated in the book was just the way that there's so much dialogue, which I love. Like, I'm a dialogue heavy writer, so I really love seeing, scenes that have a lot of dialogue, because I think in narrative nonfiction, we often get this advice like, well, you don't know the dialogue, you can't remember this. And I'm just like, we remember the core truth. We have
Right.
brains, we can make that work.
Right. And I think every nonfiction writer, I think they have to figure out where their boundaries are with things like that. But for me, first of all, memory is not truth no matter what you remember. Like, you can remember something vividly and go talk to someone else who was there and they're going to have a different version of it. So that right there to me gives me permission to, again, like you were just saying, like, what is the actual truth of what happened? Um, and how can I write it so that we can get to that truth, which is whatever emotional truth or whatever, because you're not going to get the someone was recording it truth. So,
Yeah.
what did that moment mean to you? What came of it? What kind of interaction did you have with these people? Why does that matter? Things like that. Like, of course, I don't remember the dialogue, but I do remember talking to people and like the memory of being there and like why, and I know why it was important to me. So how can I turn that into a scene to help people feel that too?
Arguments are mapped out in dialogue, which we rarely get to see, and I love. I think we rarely get to see that in a way that's literary. I think we get to see it on like Jerry Springer, but the way that you did it, I think, was very literary. There's a lot of craft in there. And then there's, really, I think people are going to use words like gritty, but I would just say like grounded um, visuals of what substance use looks like and what the anger and frustration and desperation and all of those things look like. I loved, again, because I have, my family is just full of addicts. It's just like the Florida man thing is for real in my family. And so side of all of that, there's a lot of like anger, right? And I wondered if you had anything to talk about. Women's rage is like now a hot topic in literary stuff.
Yeah. I think through writing this, I was finally able to get to a place where I was giving myself permission to feel more anger. I think especially in the South, I mean, I guess because I haven't up anywhere else, but definitely in the South, like an angry woman is not attractive. Um, you're supposed to be, soft spoken and forgiving and almost sugary sweet, even, I guess. So, and there is a part of me that has to like fight against that. Like when I feel angry, I'll start to feel guilty. But yeah, as I was writing that, I started really trying to give myself permission to just feel that anger. And really, that's just been kind of a personal journey in general.
I would like to talk to a woman who doesn't have that experience.
I mean, some people give zero fucks, and like, I really appreciate those women who are just like themselves and they're like, yeah, I'm pissed. But it also intimidates me because I think part of it for me is I'm a people pleaser, and that's something else I'm working on, but like I like to be liked. I don't like knowing that people don't like me or they're judging me. And I think when you're angry or moving through the world in a way that seems angry, it can push people away. And that terrifies me for some reason. although the older I'm getting, I'm like, who cares? Like my people will find me and they will stay, whether I'm angry or not.
Feel like age is giving me that gift too. And I heard about that when I was younger from older women. They're like, by the time you're like in your 40s, you're going to be like, oh, I don't care anymore. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm looking forward to that shit.
Right. Like I don't even want you in my life anyway. So like at least this like weeds people out up front. And I say that confidently. I'm still not that confident, but like I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
It's a process. No, I'm with you. I'm the same way. I mean, I'm a horrible fawner. It's like I should just be named Fawn. Like it's all I
Yes. Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that.
there seems to be like a lot of hesitance with people around like military subject,
Right. Mhm.
which I'm like, I think that you give a human angle. Like there's stuff like you mentioned like military settings and stuff like that, but I think
Right.
doesn't everybody want to know what that looks like? I mean, before I was, married to somebody in the military, I was always like, what is base like?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I tried. I mean, I tried. Obviously, it's based in the middle. Like my husband was in the Marine Corps. All of that is there. But I did try really hard to write it in an accessible way that where hopefully readers can connect on an emotional level, a human level. Um, I think the humor can translate to anyone who I guess isn't afraid of like raunchy humor a little bit. But yeah, I don't think it's just for military. I tried really hard to make it read like a story and to connect to anyone who is interested at all.
Mhm.
The dedication, it's for anyone who has ever had to choose when all they had were impossible options. I think anyone who has lived a life where they felt like it was, one decision after another made not because those were things that you really, really wanted, but those were just the things that were offered to you and you were doing the best that you could. And then maybe feeling like ashamed because people were blaming you for where you ended up, and your circumstances when what the heck could you have done? Because any of the other options you had would have led you to another probably just a shitty place. If anyone who's ever experienced anything like that, I think will get something from this.